Redemption Loop. Written by Svein Otto Vesteng. Interlude. On the day humanity first glimpsed parallel universes, our world began its slow descent into ruin. A rift in reality appeared, and through it the deadly black mist known as Merc Pulse flooded in, twisting animals into horrific new forms and killing humans on contact. Humanity did not stand alone. Refugees from that parallel universe, the Nivari, spirit-like beings equally ravaged by the Merc Pulse, stepped through the breach. Unable to exist in our physical realm on their own, they instead bonded with humans from families of quality, sharing their essence and granting them the power to resist the ravages of the Merc Pulse. These chosen individuals became known as the first of the Totem Lords. Heroes, gods among men, they saved humanity through rapid innovation with the aid of their Nivari partners. Together, they constructed the impregnable Heart Dome, a final refuge where the last remnants of humanity survive. Excerpt from the journals of historian Pikal of House Hall. Chapter 1. Boy in the Mines. Even the future supreme ruler of the universes had to eat. Draven swayed with each jolt of the train as it rumbled deeper into the murk-deep crystal mine. Instead of paying for a moderately comfortable seat, he'd chosen a free spot in the rear cart. The rotten cargo crate he was wedged into reeked of stale water. The wood flaked beneath his fingers, soft, splintering, unfit for carrying anything, which made it perfect for hiding. Dim light gleamed through the missing planks. That was good. Draven didn't like the dark. He was pretty sure he could hear things whispering to him in there. He wasn't hiding out of fear. Fear got you killed. No, he was never scared. It was a smart way to save money. Well, unless he got caught. But that wouldn't happen. There were no eye drones on the train, which meant bullies, blackmailers, and worse scum tended to get bad ideas. So this was simply the practical choice, one he'd picked up fast in his new life as a mine worker. After sneaking in for just 2 days, he was already developing a routine. He was on track. At 14, the oppressive Totem Lords had deemed it illegal for him to work in the mine. Like they had any power to set rules for the future supreme ruler of the universes, and it's not like he had much choice after his dad decided to drop a large stone on his own leg. Moonshine for breakfast, of course. Draven was left to keep everyone alive, which meant saving credits any way he could. If only he were 16, then he could have his own credit fob. But because he was impersonating his father, all the credits went to his account. So he worked longer days just to cover what his dad burned on drink. Sure, his inevitable ascension to supreme ruler and eventual ownership of everything was a given. No doubt there. But at the moment, he was very much stripped of funds. Yes, one day he was going to build a castle in the domed city, ideally atop the ruins of the defeated Totem Lords. But one step at a time. Every good plan had its steps, and his initial goal was simple: preserve what he had and earn more than his father could spend. If anyone noticed him somewhere he shouldn't be, someone was sure to turn him in. He wasn't the only child down here, and certain miners made good money sniffing them out. Minimizing interactions was, therefore, essential. Draven's stomach felt hollow. They needed credits. Bad. His sister Renna was the one providing his royal feast, a single strip of cave lizard jerky. He'd burn this whole worthless world to cinders before ever admitting it tasted like salted sandpaper, though. She had, after all, tracked, trapped, and skinned the beast herself. Workdays were long and brutal, and mistakes could be lethal. It would be dumb to burn all his calories right away. He saved the jerky for later. The train began to slow, jolting him where he lay, followed by the metallic whirring of the doors unlocking. Footsteps and the mutter of grumpy voices came next. Draven stayed still, waiting. Then came the clanking footsteps of the loader androids, humanoid, soulless machines with massive arms built for back-breaking labor. Stamped on their chassis was the logo of House Lilar, a green circle with red plants sprouting orange petals like it was strangling the world. Their heads were beveled screens, each one displaying the friendly face of a gruff man in a hollow mockery of humanity. The machines eventually found what they came for and stepped off the train. This was his window. Draven gritted his teeth and stuffed the remaining jerky into his coat, a salty snack for later. Clutching the edge of the crate, he slowly raised his eyes to peer into the cargo area. Not a living soul or metallic husk in sight. Listening carefully for the faintest sound, he crawled out of the crate and pulled his backpack up behind him. Staying low, he slipped off the train. House Lilar's murk-deep crystal mine was a vast, suffocating labyrinth. If you didn't know where you were going, you could vanish into its depths, swallowed whole by the tunnels. Pipes lined the walls, glowing red. This was the Umbral Pulse Power Network. It pulsed with an eerie, rhythmic hum as deadly, concentrated murk pulse flowed through it, like the veins of some slumbering giant. Death? It was always lurking, not just some wild rumor. People died every day. Cave-ins, pockets of gaseous murk pulse, other miners. Honestly, it wasn't hard to see why his father relied on drink to steady his nerves. But that didn't make it fair to Draven, or his sister. No way to treat a young supreme ruler, not at all. He bent over and grabbed a handful of dirt. It smelled like minerals and industrial solvents, but he still rubbed it across his face. Then he pulled his scarf up over his nose to finish the look. It wasn't a perfect disguise, but he looked enough like his dad that if you didn't know him well, the grime might help hide his age, and the scarf covered a chin not quite as chiseled. The workers splintered off into their designated areas, and the press of bodies began to thin. Above the tunnel entrance, a massive propaganda display flickered. It depicted a woman in a gray dress embroidered with meaningless symbols from one of the other oppressor houses. She wore her best fake smile as the message looped its ever-present warnings.
On behalf of House Lilar, we welcome you to a productive workday.
The woman took a moment to put on her serious face.
If you see something, say something. As you know, hard work and honesty are virtues.
The corners of her lips turned up in some approximation of a smile.
And you can help make this a safe and pleasant workplace. Any citizen who contributes to the discovery of Sarduk affiliates will be rewarded. By the grace of House Lilar, your earnings will be doubled for one day with every verifiable tip received. Did you see something? Failure to report suspicious activity will be considered collusion. Aiding a member will be considered a terrorist act. Have a pleasant day.
The image stuttered, then started over. It reminded Draven of school, a brainwashing camp designed to turn you into a cog in the machine just long enough to grind you to dust before replacing you with the next one. He was on a strict schedule and couldn't afford a detour in that place. They wouldn't help him on his quest, and he had no time to waste. He needed to climb the social ladder, even with next to no resources, and that was step 2 after all. Figure out how to get a raise, or better yet, a different job. One with a lower chance of death. Not that the Supreme Ruler could die down here, of course. Impossible. That would sort of ruin the future part of Future Ruler. He moved toward his work area, taking in the massive industrial sprawl of the murk-deep umbral crystal mine. Metal walkways crisscrossed overhead, and a maze of umbral pulse tubes and water pipes lined the walls, hissing softly when vents released bursts of steam. Draven jumped every time, mistaking the sound for escaped murk pulse. A lungful of that was enough to kill. The deadly substance seemed to seek out life, and if you heard it, it was usually already too late, unless you were lucky enough to have some other, less fortunate miner between you and the drifting mist. Every so often, a droplet of grimy water struck the ground with a hollow ping, echoing in the distance. Flickering umbral lanterns overhead cast harsh shadows across the towering walls, revealing streaks of rust and crusted mineral deposits. The air itself felt heavy, loaded with metal particles, sweat, and the ever-present stench of chemicals. The oppressively hot, stale air tasted of those same metal shavings. Somewhere far off, heavy machinery chugged and whirred, no doubt melter drills paving the way for the workers. Graffiti on the cave wall caught his eye. That wasn't there yesterday. Walking up to it, he was greeted by a crude depiction of a duality mask, half outline, half filled in. The symbol of the Sarduk, a terrorist cell, or at least that's what the totem lords called them. Then again, terrorist pretty much applied to anyone who didn't kiss the boots of their oppressors. Was the paint still wet? This was recent. The sharp clatter of robotic legs on stone jarred Draven from his art appreciation. If they found him here with the paint still wet, they'd no doubt blame him. He dove behind a nearby crate, heart pounding. Damn. Was that the right move, or did he just make himself look even more suspicious? A villain-killer android crawled into view. 4 insect-like legs jutting from a squat metal frame, while its upper body resembled a humanoid figure. Each mechanical arm ended in an umbral pulse gun, devices capable of reducing him to little more than a smear on the floor. Its head was a square display screen with curved bevels, locked on a static still image of an angry marine's face, completely devoid of emotion. Its 4 limbs clicked ominously as they stabbed into the ground, kicking up puffs of dirt with each step. It stopped in front of the graffiti. Mechanical clicking sounds emanated from the machine, signs of it thinking, as far as Draven understood. A panel on its shoulder slid open, revealing a scanner. A white light flared across the wall as it swept the area. Why was this thing even here? Villain killers seemed like overkill for mine security. These things were designed to hold their own in a fight with totems. It had to be related to the recent uptick in Sarduk activity. Draven pressed himself flat, scarcely daring to breathe, hoping the scanner would miss him and just move on. It probably wouldn't shoot him outright. But being mistaken for a Sarduk with one of those things around, they weren't exactly known for their love of context. The android turned, sweeping its scanner toward the crate. Draven held his breath, like that would help. As the scanner hit the crate, he could hear his own rapid heartbeat echoing from the machine's speakers. The metallic voice barked, the pixelated face on its screen twisting into something angrier.
Life sign detected. Suspicious activity in progress.
The umbral pulse guns began to glow, heating up, smoke curling from their vents.
Step out and identify yourself, citizen.
Draven wanted to, but his body wasn't cooperating.
Failure to comply within the count of 6 will be taken as hostile intent. 1.
Damn it.
2.
May the Merc Pulse swallow this whole worthless world.
3.
With effort, Draven got to his feet.
4.
Don't shoot. I'm complying, okay?
He raised his hands slowly, struggling to summon the most apologetic expression he could muster.
I'm sorry,
Draven said, forcing his voice to stay steady.
I just dropped something. On the ground here. I didn't mean to startle you.
The machine regarded him, the face on its monitor unchanging. He tried to hold still, but his heart was pounding, still loud on the speaker. It felt like the machine was holding it up for him to see, like some predator savoring its prey before the pounce. Should he run? No, that would guarantee it shot him.
Compliance failure,
The machine said, its voice as flat as polished granite. It raised its pulse guns at Draven. His stomach dropped. What did he do? The machine clarified,
Comply as instructed and provide citizen-registered name and identification number.
The hum from the umbral gun was like the growl of a wild animal, hard to focus.
Failure to comply will result in permanent removal of hostile.
This was bad. He couldn't mess up. Draven closed his eyes, concentrating hard, and recited what he'd spent the last 2 days memorizing.
Dorian Dirge, ID 4587.
It was his dad's name and ID number. It didn't turn him into a smear of ash on the wall. That was good. He opened his eyes slowly, meeting the pixelated gaze of the machine. It stood there, unmoving, but its limbs twitched. Tiny mechanical clicks and shifting servos filled the air like an insect chewing through steel. It was thinking. His father's ID should still be in the Umbral Network registry. He'd never reported his injury either. This should work. It had to. Finally, the machine spoke again, its tone a fraction less menacing.
Merc Deep Citizen Dorian Dirge found. Employment and assignment to Node SK 47 confirmed. Deviant behavior still suspect. Elevated vitals suggest deception. You are instructed to follow.
Follow you where?
Draven asked, apprehensive.
Comply.
Defeated, he stepped forward, making sure to keep his hands visible. The android's legs rotated, realigning with its path, but its torso remained locked on him, rifles still ready to unleash death on command. His execution was postponed for a few more steps at least. No, thinking like that was defeatist. These soulless metallic demons had nothing on the future Supreme Ruler. The android started walking, its clink-clank footfalls bouncing off the walls with each step. Draven would be whoever he needed to be to get through this. He decided to step into the role of an innocent man. Straightening his posture, he forced his breathing to steady through his nose. Straightening his backpack, he marched forward. Umbral crystals formed when Merc pulse seeped into the ground. With no life to twist, it bonded with minerals instead, growing into black crystals that crackled with condensed crimson energy, like the same pulse flowing through the Merc pulse mist. These crystals could be used as batteries, and they were essential for daily operations. Only problem was they liked forming close to the surface. Several elevators stood lined up, ready to send workers up uncomfortably near the outside world, where the Merc pulse would end you in seconds without advanced protection gear. Gear someone like Draven didn't have access to. Heck, even the gas mask stuffed in his pack didn't really work. It was just there to pass the regulation checklist required to work. To enter one of the active dig sites, you had to pass inspection. The android inspectors lacked the menace of the trigger-happy villain killers. They were built to look more human, with slender feminine frames and sleek white beveled screens for heads, each one depicting the smiling, pixelated face of a black-haired woman. Like a substitute motherly figure designed to put you at ease before sending you off to die. They wouldn't kill you. But they were just as soulless as the rest of the metallic oppressors. The walk had slowed Draven's thundering heart a little, but as he approached the inspector, still under escort by the villain killer, its umbral guns hissing with anticipation of cremating the future Supreme Ruler, his treacherous heart was already considering another sprint, intent on beating its previous record. A few mine workers stood around in groups, talking and laughing. Some of them smelled like they agreed with Draven's father. That liquid nerve-dulling fire was a good way to start the day. If any of the workers got suspicious, they wouldn't hesitate to report him. Ideally, he would have waited to slip through when fewer people were around. But the steel demon in front of him had forced his hand, messing up his well-planned strategy. The villain killer approached the inspector, its speaker crackling with a burst of seemingly random tones, Demonic machine language, Draven thought. The inspector responded with a sharp volley of static-laced sounds, a quick back-and-forth exchange. Then it turned toward Draven.
Citizen, you are under suspicion. Identify yourself and present your designated work chip or face immediate incarceration and interrogation.
The machine's voice buzzed through worn-out speakers, a welcome sign. This android had seen better days. Its maintenance was clearly neglected, dulling its sensors. The other inspectors he had encountered so far seemed in a similar state. And with all the underage workers running around down here, legal or not, Draven was convinced the mine's tyrannical owners allowed it on purpose. With the death rates what they were, they didn't have time for anyone to grow up. A strange chemical smell leaked from the android's umbral core, hanging in the air, making his stomach lurch. He was grateful he'd skipped breakfast. Straightening into his I am not suspicious pose, he said,
Dorian Dirge, identification 4587.
keeping his voice steady. He held out his arm, pulse hammering in his ears. The android swept its scanner over his father's ID chip, tucked into an arm wrap instead of embedded beneath the skin. His father had removed it so Draven could use it. Would the machine notice it wasn't buried deep enough? The android paused. Its frame twitched faintly, mechanical servos whirring and clicking, like a rat gnawing at iron. Draven's stomach clenched. Then the machine chirped.
Dorian Dirge, identification 4587 confirmed. Today you have been cleared for newly opened Section G of Site SK-47.
There was a slight audio hitch before a pre-recorded female voice kicked in.
And as always, report any suspicious activity to your nearest supervisor. House Lilar values the safety of all its workers.
Draven bit back a sneer. As if those corporate overlords cared about anything but their bottom line. If not for the totem lords propping them up, the common people would have torn down their castles and shared their stolen wealth and power long ago. Parasites colluding with the Nivari aliens in exchange for unearned power. They deserved nothing. Without as much as an apology, the villain killer powered down its guns. The pixelated face on its screen looked almost disappointed. Bastard! With the menacing clink-clack of its insect-like legs, it stalked away, like a dog refused a treat, no doubt off to terrorize someone else. In truth, they were more terrifying than the actual Sarduk terrorists. Draven stepped past the inspector without looking back and headed for a quiet spot where he could collect himself. There was one place he liked best, a spot he knew no one would bother him. Just past the elevators, a small alcove near one of the gear storage areas behind the medical tent. When he arrived, he found the usual sight. Today there were 2 human bodies lying motionless on a rock slab carved into the wall by melter drills, barely covered by a dirty tarp. When accidents happened, this was where they brought the bodies, until the corpse android arrived at the end of the day to incinerate them. Draven walked up to one of the still forms and pulled the tarp aside to see the man's face. His eyes were wide open, turned pitch black by the toxic mist. They must have hit a pocket of merc pulse while digging for umbral crystals. Any tunnel that connected too close to the surface meant death. Draven felt uneasy being this near to it himself. He studied the man's face. What had he been thinking before work today? What plans had he made? What dreams for the future now abandoned forever? It was a common enough sight down here. Most workers avoided the spot, afraid of the dead or worse, of joining them. Draven didn't fear the dead. They were the only ones who wouldn't stab him in the back. And if he paid attention to how they met their fate, maybe he could avoid joining them. After all, who would protect his little sister Rena if he didn't make it out of here? Who would build that grand castle for her to live in? His racing heart finally began to settle. When he held out his hand, it still shook, but not uncontrollably. Maybe his luck would hold for a little while longer.
You know, I've been watching you, kid.
Draven stiffened at the voice behind him and spun around. A man loomed over him, broader than most miners, with arms like support beams and a grin full of teeth. Down here, anyone that well fed was trouble. Nobody got that big playing fair.
You can't be much older than 12,
the man said, his tone laced with mockery. Draven was skinny for his age. Lack of proper food would do that to a person. But 12? The bastard was making fun of him. The android demon had exposed him to prying eyes, drawing forth a parasite sensing weakness. He forced a casual shrug.
Oh, no, sir. I assure you, I'm at least 16.
The man chuckled.
At least 16, huh? That's a mighty interesting way to phrase it. Not sure, are we?
Draven clenched his jaw.
16, sir,
he insisted. The man's grin widened.
If you're 16, then I'm a villain killer android.
He mimed having guns for hands, aiming them at Draven in a mock reenactment of his situation, chuckling at his own bad joke.
Impressive, right?
He was toying with Draven. The fool had no idea he was messing with the future supreme ruler. Not that anyone knew that yet. But one day, they would. Draven narrowed his eyes and crossed his arms over his chest.
I can tell you're not here for pleasant banter. What do you want?
The man looked at him, disappointed that Draven wasn't playing along.
Better question is, what do you want? A young, troubled kid sneaking into a high-security crystal mine. Kinda sounds like something a Sarduk terrorist might do.
Draven kept his face blank.
I'm here to work, sir. Just work.
I'd like to believe that, kid. I really would.
The man drawled, letting the silence hang heavy between them. Draven's hands balled into fists, though he knew he wouldn't stand a chance against this giant. The man seemed to think the same. He cocked an eyebrow at Draven's stance, amused. He walked up and draped an arm across Draven's shoulders, all muscle. His voice dropped lower.
But here's the problem. I know you snuck in, and if I don't report you, well, they might decide I'm part of your little terrorist plot.
I am not a terrorist,
Draven said, his voice cracking despite himself. He couldn't afford to be scared. He clenched his fists tighter, forcing the feeling into something closer to rage.
Sure you're not, and I believe that,
the man said with a smirk.
But I'd feel a lot better about keeping my mouth shut if I had some incentive.
Draven tried to slice him in half with a glare.
Just spit it out already. What do you want?
Ha! Dangerous eyes for a kid,
the man said, leaning closer.
Some folks less kind than me might take that personally. But me? I'm a simple guy. Easy to keep happy, so long as I get paid.
I don't have any money,
Draven snapped.
My dad's the only one who can access the account.
So that's who you're impersonating,
the man grinned. Damn it, that was careless. Licking his lips, the man continued,
What I'm looking for is a long-term arrangement. You give me what you can, when you can.
Draven's stomach twisted. The man's forearm was bigger than his head. Beaten, Draven opened his fists.
Fine.
And that brings us to your first payment,
the man said, eyes gleaming.
What do you have for me, kid?
Nothing,
Draven said flatly.
I've got nothing but the clothes on my back.
Oh, I'm sure that's not true,
the bastard said, his gaze dropping to the square bulge in Draven's coat. Draven tensed.
Come on, man,
he said, forcing a casual tone.
The workday hasn't even started. You expect me to get through it on an empty stomach?
I don't recall asking about your day,
the man said, voice sharpening.
Either pay up, or I go have a fascinating conversation with one of our rusty overlords.
Seething, Draven yanked the small box from his coat and shoved it into the man's open hand. His last strip of cave lizard jerky, gone.
Now that's more like it,
the man said, tearing the box open and chewing loudly.
Gah, this is disgusting. Your mom can't cook for crap, kid.
He spat the half-chewed meat onto the ground.
You better work hard, because I'm taking half your haul. Come find me before you go cashing out.
Draven stared at the spit-soaked jerky, anger boiling in his gut. That was his sister's cooking, her sacrifice. He would kill this bastard one day. Oh, he was marked for death now. No doubt about that. In a mock show of affection, the man ruffled Draven's hair, sending a deep shudder of revulsion through him.
Ask for Shrag when you've got my share. Plenty of little workers down here can point you in my direction.
Patting Draven on the back, he added,
I believe in you, kid. Make me proud.
Then casually he strolled out of the alcove. Draven stood there, every fiber of his being screaming to strike him down. But he knew better. Only idiots acted on raw rage. Instead, he bent down, picked up the now empty box, dusted off the dirt, and tucked it back into his pocket, next to his heart, where it belonged. He might as well start his shift. The sooner he started, the sooner he'd be done. And one step closer to the day he'd pay them all back, in kind. Draven entered the elevator and nearly collapsed, his legs quaking from hunger and adrenaline. He lowered himself to the floor, the cold metal pressing against his back as he tried to steady his breathing. The elevator whirred and groaned, carrying him ever closer to the surface. With a jolt, followed by a harsh ping from the speaker in the corner of the metal room, the elevator stopped. Arrival. Taking a deep breath, he pushed himself to his feet on unsteady legs and stepped out. A few more paces brought him to the airlock. Standard procedure, seal the work area with an airtight door. If a Merc pulse leak occurred, only Area G would flood, sparing the rest of the SK-47 section of the mine. Hopefully. Shaking, Draven decided that if willpower wouldn't sustain him, maybe hate would. Draven's mind conjured a vivid image of Shrag's thick fingers clamping around his throat, squeezing until he gasped for air. His pulse thundered in his ears as anger surged, hot and sharp, through his veins. For one sickening moment, he could almost feel the coarse skin of Shrag's hands cutting off his breath. A metallic taste flooded Draven's mouth. He forced himself to swallow the fury rising in his chest. Bastard! One day he'd make him pay. Trying to steady himself, Draven punched in his father's ID, 4587, and the first airlock door slid open with a hiss. As he stepped through, a female voice crackled from the speakers overhead.
Please cover your eyes. Any injury from failure to comply is not the responsibility of the Lilar Corporation.
Obeying, he pressed his forearm across his face. An intense white glare lit up the narrow chamber, searing after-images into the inside of his eyelids. The faint hum of machinery filled the air, accompanied by a wave of sudden heat, like it was singeing away Merc pulse residue clinging to his clothes or skin. But Draven knew better. A single lungful of that poison would kill you. This whole process was just for show, another illusion of safety. When the lights finally shut off, spots danced across his vision. The second door slid open and noise rushed in. The clank of metal, the murmur of voices echoing through the cavernous space. The air tasted stale and faintly chemical. Ahead of him lay a wide chamber with towering walls. The rock face was carved with horizontal rows of circular holes. Above those, another row repeated higher up the wall, and then another and another. Scaffolding jutted from the stone around each row, packed with swarming workers moving in and out of their respective spiral tunnels. The melter drills had to dig these holes while the chamber was empty, because if a superheated drill struck a cluster of umbral crystals, they'd vaporize instantly, releasing deadly gaseous Merc pulse into the air. After all, umbral crystals were just that. Solidified Merc pulse vapor held together under pressure. Near the tunnel entrances, small groups of beam boys waited, teams of younger miners tasked with handing in support beams to brace the ceilings and ward off cave-ins. Standard practice was to cut a deal with the beam crews for 5% of your haul. It wasn't much, but it added up when working with larger groups. Another benefit of beam crew work was safety. If a Merc pulse pocket burst inside a tunnel, the gas would hit the nearest miners first, their screams serving as the only warning to run for the airlock. But the real money was in crystal harvesting. You got paid per crystal, and Draven needed a lot of them to offset his father's drinking and to feed himself and Rena to deal with bastards like Shrag. Draven rubbed at the phantom ache around his neck, thinking bitterly. Rage and hunger still churned in his belly, but he forced them down, letting the feelings coil tight beneath the surface. One day, Shrag would pay. He clung to that promise like a lifeline. For now he squared his shoulders, pressed on through the sweltering, clanging bustle of the mine, and steeled himself for the brutal shift ahead. At the gear station, a few young miners loitered, likely beam boys. Draven wasn't the only child down here. He had no intention of socializing. He moved to the water station, pulled the bottle from his pack, and filled it. Sweat poured from him. He downed the whole thing in a few greedy gulps. The water tasted metallic and lukewarm, but it filled his empty stomach enough to stave off the worst of the hunger pangs. Refilling his bottle, he almost regretted not eating the chewed jerky that bastard Shrag had spat out. But the Supreme Ruler would never sink that low. Next, he pulled his dad's helmet from the pack. It was too big for his head, but it had an umbral lamp built into the front, worth the hassle. Inside the spiral tunnels, there were no umbral pulse pipes, which meant no power for wall-mounted umbral lanterns. A careless swing of a pickaxe could fracture the pipes, releasing death into the air. So the only light down there was whatever you brought with you. The helmet lamp was powered by a small umbral crystal battery. It was low on charge, but the gear station had a recharge dock. He plugged it in, though he knew the old battery didn't hold a charge like it used to. Merc Pulse was dangerous, sure, but run it through the right pipes the right way and it made power. Draven didn't pretend to understand the mechanics. All he knew was that it worked. He pulled the handle, sealing the battery in place, then turned the valve. The umbral pulse tube lit up, glowing faintly as concentrated Merc Pulse flowed into it, sparking life back into the worn battery. Waiting for his battery to charge, Draven glared at the group of boys talking and laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. Naive cogs in the machine, Draven thought bitterly. One of the boys looked up and met Draven's eyes. Draven quickly looked away, but the damage was done. The boy got up and started walking toward him. Damn, what did this kid want? Draven had already taken all he could stand of being messed with. He tensed, ready for yet another confrontation. At least this one was closer to his size. Maybe he could take him if things went south.
Honestly, this is a pretty stylish coffin, if I do say so myself,
the boy remarked, flashing a big grin. Draven just stared. Was that a threat? The boy's smile crinkled around his eyes like he was trying way too hard. Something about that grin reminded Draven of his sister. It didn't put him at ease.
Don't get me wrong, friend,
the boy went on.
It's not like I plan on dying here. Jokes just help me keep my nerves.
Draven scoffed.
Fools paralyzed by fear won't last down here.
The boy stretched his arms out wide, then began hopping from one leg to the other. Draven took a wary step back.
See?
The boy said.
No paralysis here, so I guess I'll be fine.
The boy extended a hand.
Name's Ulvar. Nice to meet you.
Draven wasn't used to that level of friendliness. Awkwardly, he managed.
My name is Drav.
He caught himself. He was supposed to be his dad.
My name's Dorian.
He didn't take Ulvar's hand, though. There were limits. Undeterred by Draven's unfriendly tone, the boy kept going.
Me and those guys were talking about forming our own beam crew.
he said, gesturing toward the other boys.
We heard some workers up at Hole 7 on floor 3 were needing some help.
His grin widened.
And we were just about to head up there and ask if they want to make a deal. Are you?
Draven cut him off.
Let me just stop you right there. I'm here to earn serious credits. I've got no interest in picking up scraps as some pathetic bean boy.
The boy blinked, taken aback by the abrupt statement. Hand on his chin, he fell into deep thought. Then, as if realizing something, he looked up.
Wait, you're going to go digging on your own?
Draven scoffed.
Obviously.
The boy's eyes lit up.
Do you need a bean boy? What?
Draven said, narrowing his eyes.
I mean, if you're gonna dig on your own, wouldn't you lose a lot of time hauling all the beams up yourself? Do you even know how to use the beam lifter?
Draven stiffened. He didn't know how. The previous 2 days he'd just found a tube no one else was working and chipped away at it. Finds had been rare. He'd barely scraped by. If he wanted to even break even today, let alone earn enough to cover Shrag's tax, he'd need to pull double what he had the last 2 days. The insufferable boy had a point, but Draven didn't want to admit it, and he definitely didn't trust how friendly Ulvar was acting. Maybe if he just ignored the kid, he'd go away. He just wanted to start working. Without another word, Draven stepped back to the Umbral pulse charger. The battery should be fully charged by now. Ulvar still stood there watching him expectantly, making Draven even more uncomfortable. Eager to get going, Draven unhinged the latch holding the battery in place. Wait! He realized his mistake, heart lurching. He tried to relatch it as fast as he could. But it was already too late. He'd forgotten to turn off the valve feeding concentrated merc pulse into the charger. A pulsing cloud of black smoke, crackling rhythmically with crimson energy, rose around the battery. In an instant it gathered, coiled, and shot straight up his nose. He froze, blinking hard. That didn't just happen. There was no way. He'd inhaled more than a lungful of concentrated merc pulse. His nostrils tingled, burning like he'd snorted chemical fumes. Maybe it was just fumes? Desperately, he glanced at the charging station. But no other tubes were attached. Behind him, Ulvar clamped a hand over his mouth.
By the Totem Lords, no!
Damn it. He'd seen everything, probably loving it. Draven had just taken a deadly dose of merc pulse. He'd seen this happen to others before. They always sprinted for decontamination. It never helped. The so-called supreme ruler of the universes. Dead at age 14. Ruling nothing, owning nothing, all because he was in a hurry.